My son, David, sat across from me in the living room of the house I built with my own hands 42 years ago. He was holding a glass of scotch, the expensive stuff I keep for special occasions, and his eyes wouldn't meet mine. He was 38 now, a high-level executive at a firm downtown, but in that moment, he looked like a boy who had been caught breaking a window. He cleared his throat and set the glass down with a precise, heavy click on the mahogany coffee table. "Dad," he said, his voice rehearsed and smooth, "Chloe and I have been looking at the numbers. The upkeep on this place is astronomical. You're 72. Last week you forgot to turn off the pool heater, and the gas bill was 3 times the normal rate. We found a beautiful suite at the Gables. It's a full-service community. You won't have to worry about a thing. We've already started the paperwork for the power of attorney. We think it's best if we handle the transition." I didn't get angry. I didn't tell him that I had deliberately left the heater on to see if he was still checking my accounts. I just nodded slowly, looking at the painting of his mother, Evelyn, above the fireplace. I looked back at him and said, "I understand, David. I've always known that everything has a shelf life. I'll start sorting through my things tomorrow. My name is Arthur Sterling. I am 72 years old, and for 38 years, I was a lead systems engineer for the United States Navy's submarine division. I spent my life designing pressurized hulls, silent propulsion systems, and the complex sonar arrays that allowed our sailors to move through the deep ocean without being detected. My job was to anticipate every possible point of failure in a system before it happened. I was paid to assume that things would go wrong and to build redundancies into every design. I knew how to stay calm when the pressure was high enough to crush a man, and I knew how to listen for the tiny, inconsistent vibrations that meant a motor was failing long before it actually stopped. When Evelyn passed away 5 years ago, I felt like a ship that had lost its anchor. This house, perched on the cliffs of the Oregon coast, was our sanctuary. It was built with reinforced steel beams and cedar that had been treated to withstand a century of salt air. David had grown up here, but he never understood the engineering that went into it. He saw a house, I saw a machine. For the past year, David and his wife, Chloe, had been visiting more often. At first, I thought it was because they missed me. But then the irregularities began. My hearing aid would suddenly start emitting a high-pitched whine that only I could hear, making me wince and look confused in front of visitors. The smart home system I'd installed would play music at deafening volumes in the middle of the night, and when I'd stumble downstairs to fix it, Greg would be there, already turning it off, looking at me with a mixture of pity and frustration. The worst was the medicine. I take a mild blood pressure pill every morning. 3 months ago, I noticed the color of the pills in my weekly organizer had shifted ever so slightly. It was a different manufacturer, David claimed when I asked, but my forensic brain didn't believe him. I felt sluggish, my thoughts clouded, and my balance was off. They were drugging me with something to induce the symptoms of early-onset dementia. They wanted the property, yes, but they also wanted the Sterling Trust, a fund I'd established with the royalties from a silent valve patent that was worth millions. They needed me declared incompetent so they could bypass the morality clause Evelyn and I had written into the trust, which prevented them from liquidating the assets for 20 years. The game David was playing was amateur. He was trying to sabotage a man who had spent 40 years outsmarting foreign intelligence agencies and the unforgiving laws of physics. That Monday morning, after David left thinking he had won, I went to my basement workshop. I didn't pack clothes. I didn't pack photos. I went to the workbench and opened a hidden compartment behind the electrical subpanel. I pulled out a spectrum analyzer and a digital oscilloscope. I spent the next 6 hours scanning the house. I found them within 40 minutes, 3 ultrasonic transducers hidden behind the crown molding in the living room and bedroom. These devices emit high-frequency sound waves that can cause headaches, nausea, and disorientation in older adults whose ears are still sensitive to certain frequencies. I found a secondary Wi-Fi bridge hidden in the attic that was being used to remote access my home automation system. I didn't remove them. In engineering, you don't always fix a leak immediately, sometimes you let it flow so you can see exactly where the water is coming from. I installed my own black box recorder into the home's main server, an encrypted unit that logged every remote command and mapped it to the IP address of the sender. I also took a sample of my new medication to a private lab in the city. The results came back 48 hours later, scopolamine. In low doses, it's used for motion sickness. In the doses I was being given, it causes memory loss, confusion, and a state of high suggestibility. I spent Thursday evening writing. Not a letter of goodbye, but a technical manual for their destruction. I contacted my old colleague from the Navy, a man named Admiral Thomas Vance, who now sat on the board of the very firm that David worked for. I invited him for dinner on Friday, the same night David and Chloe were coming to finalize the paperwork for my relocation. I told David that I wanted a final family meal before the big move. He was delighted. He thought the prey was walking willingly into the trap. Friday evening arrived with a fierce storm rolling in off the Pacific. The wind howled against the cedar siding, and the waves crashed against the cliffs below. Inside, the house was warm and smelled of roasted lamb. Chloe was acting the part of the grieving daughter-in-law, touching my hand and asking if I remembered to take my vitamins. David was hovering near the sideboard, his briefcase open, the legal documents laid out like a death warrant. Admiral Vance arrived at 7 p.m., his presence commanding and stern. David was surprised to see him. He tried to hide his panic behind a mask of professional respect. "Admiral," he said, shaking the older man's hand, "I didn't realize you and my father were still in touch." "We go back a long way, David," the Admiral said, his eyes scanning the room like he was on the bridge of a destroyer. "Your father is the finest engineer I've ever known. He doesn't make mistakes." We sat down to dinner. For the first 30 minutes, I played the part they expected. I fumbled with my fork. I asked David the same question 3 times. I complained that the room felt like it was spinning. Chloe exchanged a look with David, a look of triumph. The Admiral sat quietly, watching me, his face unreadable. David finally couldn't wait any longer. "Dad," he said, pulling the papers toward the center of the table, "while the Admiral is here as a witness, perhaps we should sign these. It's the healthcare proxy and the asset management transfer. It will make things so much easier for you at the Gables." I looked at the papers. I looked at the pen in David's hand. Then, I looked at the clock. 8:15 p.m. Right on schedule. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, palm-sized remote. I didn't say a word. I pressed the red button. Suddenly, the ultrasonic whine in the room stopped. The red alert lights on my smart home system flashed once and then turned a steady, cool blue. I stood up, my back straight, my hands as steady as the day I was commissioned. "David," I said, my voice projecting with the authority of a man who had commanded thousands, "the problem with amateur sabotage is that it lacks redundancy. You relied on the assumption that I was the one failing, rather than the system you were trying to manipulate." David's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Chloe reached for the documents, but Admiral Vance placed a heavy hand on her wrist. "I wouldn't do that, Chloe," he said softly. I set a second folder on the table. "This is the report from the toxicology lab," I told them. "It shows the concentration of scopolamine in my system. And this," I tapped a tablet on the table that began playing a high-definition video, "is the footage from the hidden camera in the attic showing Greg installing the Wi-Fi bridge 3 weeks ago. But the best part, David, is the digital log. Every time you triggered the dementia symptoms, from your phone, my server recorded your GPS coordinates and your device's unique ID. You were doing it from your office. You were doing it while you were sitting right here at this table." David turned to the Admiral, desperation in his eyes. "This is a misunderstanding, Admiral. My father he's paranoid. He's creating these things. The Admiral didn't look at David. He looked at me. "Arthur, is the system secure?" I nodded. "The data has already been uploaded to a secure cloud server, Admiral. My attorney and the district attorney's office received the encrypted link 10 minutes ago. I also sent a copy to your firm's ethics committee, David. I believe the bylaws are quite clear about executives who commit felony fraud against their own family members." Chloe began to scream that I was a monster, that they were just trying to help, that the house was too much for me. I looked at her with a coldness that only 40 years of naval discipline can produce. "You didn't want the house, Chloe. You wanted the dirt it sits on and the money in the vault. You saw an old man and thought you saw a weak link in the chain. But in this house, I am the structural integrity." I leaned over the table, my face inches from David's. He was trembling now. "You are my son," I said, "and for that reason, I am giving you exactly 60 seconds to take those papers, walk out of that door, and never step foot on this property again. If you are still here in 61 seconds, the Admiral will call the police officers who are currently waiting at the end of the drive. You will lose your job, your reputation, and your freedom. If you leave now, I will withhold the criminal charges on the condition that you sign a full renunciation of any claim to the Sterling Trust or this estate." David didn't hesitate. He grabbed Chloe's arm and practically dragged her toward the door. They didn't even take their coats. I heard the front door slam, and a moment later, the sound of their car tires screeching on the wet pavement. The house fell silent again, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock and the distant roar of the ocean. Admiral Vance picked up his glass of scotch and raised it to me. "To a clean hull, Arthur," he said. I sat back down, feeling the weight of the last few months finally lift. "I'm 72, Thomas," I said. "I'm tired." The Admiral smiled. "You're not tired, Arthur. You were just bored. Now that the trash has been taken out, what are you going to do with all this space?" I looked around the room. I looked at the cedar walls and the steel beams. I thought about the thousands of hours I had spent making sure things worked perfectly. "I'm going to open a school," I told him. "A workshop for the kids in town who want to learn how to build things that last. I want to teach them that the most important part of any machine isn't the motor or the gears. It's the foundation. And I'm going to start by taking those ultrasonic transducers and turning them into something useful, maybe a bird deterrent for the garden." The storm raged outside for 3 more days, but inside, everything was in balance. I spent that time cleaning every corner of my home, removing the last traces of my son's betrayal. I felt a profound sense of peace. I had spent my life protecting a nation from threats beneath the waves, but the greatest threat I ever faced had been sitting at my dinner table. I had neutralized it the only way I knew how, with precision, with evidence, and with the cold, hard truth of a well-engineered plan. A year has passed since that night. David is living in a small apartment in a different state, working a mid-level job he hates. He hasn't called, and I haven't reached out. Some things are too broken to be repaired, even for a master of restoration. My workshop is now full of noise and life. Every Tuesday and Thursday, 4 local teenagers come over. I teach them how to solder, how to read a schematic, and how to listen to the soul of a machine. They call me Mr. Sterling, and they look at me with respect, not pity. One of them, a bright girl named Maya, asked me recently why I have so many security cameras and sensors in a house that's so far away from everyone. I looked at the ocean, the same ocean that had seen so many ships rise and fall, and I smiled. I told her, "Maya, in engineering, we have a term called the safety factor. It's the practice of making a structure stronger than it needs to be to withstand the unexpected. In life, you have to be your own safety factor. You have to be stronger than the people who want to break you, and you have to be smarter than the people who think you've outlived your usefulness. I am Arthur Sterling. I am 73 years old. My mind is sharp, my heart is guarded, and my house is a fortress. I lost a son, but I found my purpose. I learned that family isn't about blood, it's about the integrity of the bond. If that bond is rotten, you don't try to paint over it. You cut it out and you replace it with something solid. And as I sit on my porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I know that my foundation is stronger than it has ever been. This story serves as a reminder to anyone who thinks they can outsmart the generation that built the world they live in. We may be older, our joints may creak like an old ship's hull, but we know where the pressure points are. We know how the systems work because we are the ones who designed them. If you try to sabotage us, if you try to treat us like a problem to be solved or an asset to be liquidated, remember one thing, we have the blueprints. We know where the emergency exits are, and we know exactly how to shut down the power. I spent my life in the silent service, moving through the dark and the cold without making a sound. My son thought I was a ghost, a relic of a dying age. He forgot that ghosts are the ones who know all the secrets of the house. He forgot that silence isn't a sign of weakness, it's the sound of a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. I'm still here, the lights are on, and the system is green across the board. The audit is complete, and for the first time in my life, the ledger is perfectly balanced. In the months that followed, I took a renewed interest in the world outside my cliffs. I realized that my isolation had made me a target, and while I loved my fortress, a fortress is only as good as the life it protects. I began to travel, visiting the old naval yards and the museums where the machines I designed now sit in silent honor. I met men I had served with, men who understood the weight of the deep ocean. We talked about the old days, but we also talked about the future. We talked about how the world had changed, how digital lies had replaced mechanical truths, and how important it was for our stories to be told. I started writing my memoirs, not for fame, but for the record. I wanted to document the physics of a life well lived. I wrote about the tension of a hull at 3,000 feet and the tension of a family at the breaking point. I found that writing was much like engineering. You start with a frame, you add the internal systems of thought and emotion, and you refine it until it can withstand the pressure of public scrutiny. David sent me a letter on my 73rd birthday. It was a short, bitter note, blaming me for his failures, claiming that I had destroyed his life over a small mistake. I didn't get angry. I didn't even feel the sting of his words. I simply placed the letter into my shredder. In my world, a small mistake in a submarine hull means everyone dies. There is no room for error when lives are on the line, and there is no room for betrayal when love is the foundation. He still didn't understand that integrity isn't a sliding scale. You either have it, or you don't. I often think about Evelyn. I wonder what she would think of the way things turned out. She was the emotional engineer of our family, the one who smoothed over the rough edges of my personality and David's ambition. I think she would be sad, but I also think she would understand. She loved the truth more than she loved comfort. She would have wanted me to be safe, and she would have wanted our legacy to be used for something good, not squandered on Chloe's designer bags or David's ego. The teenagers in my workshop are building a small submersible now, a drone that can explore the tide pools without disturbing the ecosystem. They face problems with buoyancy and signal interference, and I watch them struggle with a smile. I don't give them the answers. I tell them to look at the data. I tell them to find the point of failure. When Maya finally figured out the seal on the battery compartment, the look of pure joy on her face was worth more to me than all the patent royalties in the world. That is the real sterling trust. That is the energy that never dies. I've also become a bit of a local legend in the town. The old man on the cliff, who knows everything about everything. People come to me with broken clocks, broken engines, and sometimes, broken hearts. I fix what I can, and for the things I can't fix, I offer the perspective of a man who has seen the bottom of the ocean and lived to tell about it. I tell them that pressure can either turn you into a diamond or it can crush you into dust. The choice depends on what you're made of on the inside. My health has actually improved since I stopped taking the vitamins David provided. My mind is clearer than it has been in years. I've taken up gardening, finding a strange satisfaction in the slow, predictable growth of plants. They don't lie. They don't plot. If you give them what they need, they thrive. If you don't, they wither. It's a simple system, and I appreciate the honesty of it. I've planted a row of white roses for Evelyn along the south wall, where the sun hits the cedar just right. The house is no longer a fortress to me, it's a lighthouse. I keep the lights bright not to keep people away, but to show them the way in. I've hosted 2 community dinners this year, filling the rooms with the sound of laughter and conversation, real conversation, not the hollow, manipulative talk of the past. I realized that David hadn't just been trying to steal my money, he had been trying to steal my connection to the world. By making me believe I was fading, he was trying to dim my light. But he forgot that a lighthouse is built to withstand the storm, not to hide from it. As I look forward to my 74th year, I feel a sense of excitement I haven't felt since I was a young lieutenant. There are still so many problems to solve, so many systems to understand. The world is a complex, beautiful, and often dangerous place, but I am not afraid. I have my tools, I have my records, and I have my truth. I have built a life that is redundant, resilient, and real. To anyone who finds themselves in a situation like mine, where the people you love have turned into the people you fear, I say this: trust your sensors. If something feels wrong in the structure of your life, it's because it is wrong. Don't let them tell you that you're confused or forgetful just because you see the flaws they're trying to hide. You are the architect of your own existence. You have the right to defend the house you built. And to the children who think their parents are just assets to be managed, be warned. We were the ones who taught you how to think, and we kept the best lessons for ourselves. We know how to play the long game. We know how to wait for the pressure to equalize before we make our move. You may have the technology, but we have the experience. You may have the ambition, but we have the integrity. And in the end, integrity always wins the audit.